So we've made pretty good progress. What you're looking at here is the title page of the excuse me, the second work in the volume. There were two works that were originally bound together, so we're pretty well kind of halfway there, and I'm just sort of in the middle of just completing the sewing in of this the second piece here. So worth just talking through some of what I've done and some of the learnings. The first thing was put the top and bottom marked on the board. That's to avoid the possibility that you actually put pages in upside down, which I almost did. The other thing I did quite early on was when I started out, I actually sort of did a line around one of the most robust, incomplete gatherings that I could find. So I got a good idea of the size of what the text block would look like. Now, the reason for that is that the pages at the beginning and the end of the book were very frail, and the inner edges of the pages had suffered a lot of erosion. So as I was sort of sticking those back together, I needed to have a good idea of how big I could go. Otherwise, I'm going to end up with a text block that's sort of quite raggedy. The other thing that's kind of interesting is you'll notice, there's quite a lot of sort of thread visible outside. That's because I've taken a deliberate decision to sort of put the needle in, go down a spot, come out, stay out a spot, go in, out, etc. So the reason I've done it that way, there are two reasons, I guess. The first is I'm conscious that the sort of after end of the text block here is going to become thicker than the rest of the book. That's largely because there are a few loose pages here and there, and so I've had to use thin strips of contemporary paper to sort of stick them back down and provide something through which I can push the needle and actually sort of tie the gatherings into the text block. But they have a thickness, and the aggregate result of that is that the book's going to be slightly thicker here than here. What the previous bookbinder had done was they would go in, thread around, then come out and immediately loop around the binding, go back in, loop, go back in, loop. So all of the thread was actually inside the text block. Now, if I do that, I'm only going to make the thickness issue worse, I guess. The other thing is, what this enables me to do is, if you've seen my other videos, you'll know that how I approach this is I put a piece of fabric that's heavily soaked in glue on the text block, and that really gives a lot of strength and rigidity to the block. And by making sure that these threads are in contact with the glue of that fabric, it just creates extra resiliency. Whereas what looks to have previously happened was, if a thread broke, there was really nothing to stop the thread completely unraveling, and that's probably a large piece of why this, text block came apart quite quickly after it was put together. But having the thread going internal and external, having these slip knots over the metal here that will eventually be over, the raised bands, adds an extra layer of friction as well. It'll just, if one of these threads were to break, it would just stop that from cascading into a sort of a failure of the whole text block. So that's kind of the reason I'm sort of doing this method. You could argue it's somewhat inefficient, and I could use less thread and just be done quicker, but I think that's probably the best way for me to go. So I'm really just going to continue the process. I'm halfway through. I've got the rest of the gatherings there, and so I'm just going to continue to build it up until the book will probably end up being about this high. And then once that's complete, we'll be in a position to lift the text block off of these pieces of metal onto, hopefully, some nice threads like this that I'm going to sort of stick over with a bit of tape, and these will in effect then become the core of the raised bands that will enable us to attach some boards and complete the restoration. So plenty of work to do, and I'll see you on the other side.